Thanks everybody for attending. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Matt Yeti. I'm a senior solutions architect with IVOXY Consulting. I've been here for 10 years. I can actually say it now. It's just went past the ticker. It's real 10 years, not almost 10 years. So I'm very proud of that. I'm joined this morning by Steve Huser. Steve is the technical partner manager for Pure Storage in the Pac Northwest. Is that right, Steve?
The whole West.
The whole West, all the Wild West, the Wild West. Yeah. And so we're here to chat about a recap of Pure's Accelerate. So Pure's Accelerate is their VM world, right? It's their yearly conference where they fire up the troops. I've managed to attend it once in person. It was in Austin in 2019. It would have been 2019 because 2020 it all fell apart there. But so as one of the sessions at Accelerate was the SE breakout for the Global Partner Forum. And this is something that IVOXY and myself and my colleagues just learned a few days ago, basically, to talk about what's new, stuff that was under NDA, what's up with the Pure ecosystem. And now, thankfully, thanks to Steve, we are out from under the NDA. We can share everything that's been new in the world of Pure. And we have some stuff to highlight, and Steve put together a very nice prezo to go through that, but it's not going to be just all on Steve. I'm going to relieve him, and we're going to go back and forth and kind of have a conversation here. So Steve, if you want to, feel free to go ahead and share. If anybody has any questions, please use the Q&A, and we'll try to get to all of them. At the end, we will also kind of pause and have some questions and talk, and but we'll keep you posted on that and keep an eye on Q&A. So without further ado, Steve, floor is yours, but I will be interrupting, so stand by.
Perfect. So, like, the first and foremost thing we really want to talk about is the refresh of our FlashArray//X product line. So this is by far the thing that has the most customers using it out there. It's block and file unified storage. It's where we entered the market 13 years ago when we became a company. And this is just the next iteration of that. But noteworthy is this is a big increase in performance capacity in all of the stuff over our existing R3 version. So existing customers that are part of our gold support, as it's called, will get these as part of their ownership program without disruption and see a pretty significant, so around a 40% performance boost above what they currently have. And that comes from a couple different things. You put in new processors every 3 years, there's going to be some level that you get out of that. But we're really making jumps in using a DDR5 memory. So we got a lot more bandwidth there. Going to PCIe Gen 4, we have a lot more lanes going on that we can send data on. So it's not just 64 gig fiber channel and 100 gig Ethernet coming in that you can talk to it faster. It's that the highway lanes got the speed limits increased and doubled the number of lanes on them at pretty much every aspect in the IO path. So we're really seeing a big density increase. So more capacity, same footprint, and the same power use. So we're really excited to bring our existing customers who've been with us years this level of advancement just automatically for those on our top tier support.
We do have quite a few customers who are on R3 generation hardware, and obviously, and so because if you're a Pure customer, you're not on old generation hardware. But we've had a few people questioning, like, okay, if we're coming up on renewal, what's the scoop? And sure enough, timing couldn't have been better. The R4, that's incredible when you talk about that kind of performance gain just as a matter of support renewal. In that, it's almost an old worn path when you say, hey, Pure's never had to deal with spinning disk once. They've been all flash from it, but that sort of native code and native design towards all flash means they can invest that tech in staying on top and forward and taking advantage of these, because they don't have to worry about dealing with, oh, I got the spinning rust behind it, where all of a sudden, it doesn't matter what we do, we have to eke performance. They can put that development effort into taking advantage of these architectural improvements to drive it forward, because the direct flash modules are already pushing to the max, right? That's not your bottleneck. So it's pretty great to see that kind of just matter of fact, hey, non-disruptive controller upgrade, your performance just went up 20%.
Yeah, that's a significant increase. And I think most people aren't going to need it. If you were in need of a performance increase, you would be doing something about it right now. But the typical end user we see, they're always growing. You're getting more data, you're getting more demands on that data. So this is just that validation of, hey, we're going to get in front for many customers, in front of your growth and extend the life cycle before you would have to consider any type of upgrade due to performance. You're just getting the extra performance. You're getting more modern connectivity at the back end. So as 100 gig Ethernet really comes into vogue, if you will, or 50 and 25 or 10 is really starting to fade out, to just have those natively on your storage. So when you do upgrade your network switching, it's just running a new cable and not a whole migration process. All right, so let's see if I can switch slides here effectively. It didn't do it, so I'm going to have to jump to it. Sorry for this. All right, this is where I was going, is new flash. So when you're an all flash company, this is something you're always going to want to talk about. And we have put out newer, larger flash modules. So anybody unfamiliar with Pure, we don't use SSDs. We use what we call direct flash modules. So these have our operating system directly interacting with the individual cells inside the chips of the flash. So we see a lot of advantage that we get out of this, from an efficiency, a performance, a lifetime, a reliability. I can't even think of a category that we don't think is better, but we have put out 2 new flash modules. So in our performance level of flash, we have now 36 terabyte flash modules available. So that is 36 terabytes and a single thing that goes in. Yeah. Prior to this, it was a little over 18 terabytes. So it's nearly a 2x improvement in the density we can get in the storage. And the things to note is there's no hit on performance. You don't get less performance for moving to the more dense media. And the 36 terabyte flash uses the same amount of power as an 18 terabyte flash module. So in the green aspect, or the financial green aspect of, hey, cut down power consumption as much as possible in the data center, which very, very relevant over in Europe, becoming much more relevant in the United States now, of limiting power, to say, hey, I can double the size of my capacity without actually increasing the amount of power I'm consuming in order to do that, is pretty remarkable. And that's in the performance world.
Well, if I could say, Steve, that if anybody's bought a Pure storage array in the last 3 years, you can also thank the fact that Pure builds their own storage modules for the fact that you don't have 9 months of lead time looking for that either. That they've not relied on they don't rely on Hitachi or Samsung for their hard drives, right? Because they don't have hard drives, they build their own actual storage modules, which is great. It's almost like the Apple model, right? Where it's, you know what, we could use commodity parts and this and that, but we're always bottlenecked or held back by Intel's release cycle, right? And we want to be more rapid or more innovative. We'll build our own chips, and Pure has been doing that, almost from the start, and that you're seeing the benefits of that. And now 36T, not bad. So I only need 2 of these, right, Steve? I only want 30 terabytes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't support a 2 drive pack, if you will. But this is not the only module we have out. We still have them ranging down to our 2.2 terabyte in capacity. We're just adding to the upper end. And playing off adding to the upper end, we have a second line of media, if you will, which is around density and not about performance, but about financial performance. So what is the least expensive per gigabyte storage that I can have. And that's a use case that almost every customer has. You have the very important data that you need to get to fast, but there's data that is important that you need to keep that you're not going to interact with very frequently or very much. And you really want to put it on a cost optimized platform. So we use different types of flash to meet these different types of workloads. And we put out our 75 terabyte flash module using QLC media for our different storage lines that are about density and cost per terabyte performance. So that's a very, very large increase going on in that category. Um, and then we also, discussed a little bit of futures there. It was brought up on the main stage that, hey, we're putting out the 75 today. We will have 150 within a year. And we have roadmap to 300 terabyte modules.
So let's play
horizon.
some math here. So you've got a typical pure storage array with a chassis of 210 terabyte or 210 slot data packs in a single chassis. Basically, in a 3U chassis, you can hold 20 drives before expansion shells come into play. So you go with one data pack, you do a 300/0, right? And I'm sorry, not 300/0, 3000/0, right?
Yes.
Theoretically, you've got 10 300 terabyte drives. So you got 3 petabytes in 3U, but you could also then push it out with another data pack and go to 6 petabytes in a 3U chassis on the roadmap. But today that is 1.5 petabytes, right? With your 75 terabyte modules.
So in our new product line, which was really one of the things I was going to hit on yet next, the FlashArray E is what we're using to hold these 75 terabyte modules. Also, there's a FlashBlade E, so there's a family of E products, but I'll just talk about the FlashArray version here. We're actually no longer using the NVRAM slots on the front of the chassis, and each one of those gets populated with 2 flash modules. So instead of saying I can get 20 75 terabyte flash modules, it's really 28. So it's about 2 petabytes of raw flash just in the chassis. So a half populated 14 times 75 gets you squiggly line petabyte.
Okay, so I mean, as amazing that it is, FlashArray E. Most of my customers know, they know X, they sub 1 millisecond. FlashArray C, denser capacities, okay with the 2 to 4 millisecond performance base, it's effectively constant, performance. Where's E fit into that? Obviously very dense storage, but where are we at on that? Where does it play with in regards to the C that we know of?
So for us, we see E as a new market that we haven't been playing in at all before. And this should be systems that are running disks today. So spinning disks, providing really dense, ultra inexpensive storage. And we're looking to replace that. So there shouldn't be much overlap. There will be some overlap with C where people were actually reaching up and getting a little bit more cost and performance than they probably needed. But we're saying, hey, with a flash, I can put this on there and know that I could run it for 10 years on this platform. So even if my initial acquisition is more expensive, my long-term operations will save. The E is looking to be at cost parity with those disk-based systems. So I can run it longer, it'll use less power, it'll be more reliable, is just all icing on top of that price parity cake.
So I saw the declaration that spinning disk is gone in 5 years or whatever it was. That's it. Now, what's the performance envelope of this? The expectations on that?
So the expectations on this are still to be much better than disk.
Oh, sure.
But there's going to be really limits on throughput. What you can expect is to see probably above 6 to 7 milliseconds of latency response times, which probably half the response time of a typical disk-based system. And that's our numbers on sequential or random. So we're going to be about twice as good as a disk-based system from performance on sequential. When you go into random, it's going to be significantly higher than a disk-based system. because our performance is the same, but on a
Right.
disk system, great for sequential, gets really bad on the randoms anytime that seeker head has to move.
Yep.
Uh, so it is better than disk. I wouldn't say twice as good.
But
I'd
if you're coming
say
in at cost parity or that target, then, that's a net benefit.
yeah, and the real net benefit is we're going to do it in about 1/8 of the rack space and the power that
Power.
that
Oh, yeah.
disk-based system is using. So if we can come in at anywhere near cost parity, even someone who doesn't like to account for power costs,
Mm.
a petabyte system uses, more power than the average household, just constantly sitting there spinning these. And to say I can cut that down, by 80%, that is something that does play into the business. And then to say I can run the system for twice as long as the old one, I mean, that just doubles up on your acquisition cost savings. And let's talk about, hey, there's a lot of green on this slide, and we are true believers that we're reducing e-waste, we're shipping less material, we're saying running something longer is a far better improvement than even just reducing the impact of a specific device. If I can say, oh, we use 20% less stuff to make this thing, that's not as impactful as saying you can run something twice as long. So we're really bringing it all together. We're using less stuff. We don't use rare earth elements like they have to in the magnets on disks. So a lot of less resources involved in just creating the physical assets to begin with, and then doubling the lifetime you can expect from it at a fraction of the power used. We're really excited for the future of helping people shrink their data center footprint, and especially power and cooling use.
I think my Plex library would fit nicely on one of these. If one of them showed up my doorstep, Steve, I don't think I'd be complaining. So just putting that out there, the world.
If I see one fall off a truck, I'll let you
Yeah,
know.
I bet. Very cool.
But this fits into our E family. And we have two products in the E family. We have a FlashArray E and a FlashBlade E. And really kind of that delineation in them right now is capacity. So this one's going to start at about a petabyte of raw flash. And people can grow in increments of 300 terabytes. So that would be starting with that initial pack and then growing in packs of 4 as it gets populated out. So is that granular? Well, it's more granular than saying you have to grow in petabyte chunks. So there's some level of granularity. I'm not going to say it's very, very granular, but 300 terabytes are the chunks you can grow in.
I guess usually when you're playing in that kind of capacity, the jumps are not minute, right? They're bigger chunks at that point.
The FlashBlade E starts at 4 petabytes. That's kind of where this cuts off currently. We support FlashArray E and 1 expansion shelf, so you can go from 1 to 4 petabytes in the FlashArray E. The FlashBlade E starts at that 4 petabytes of flash, and then grows from there. You got 4, 6. It goes to 8 petabytes right now, and that only grows in those 1 petabyte chunks. So it's not a small system in any way and doesn't grow. But that's, there isn't a capacity overlap in the line right now. We got one that goes from 1 to 4, one that goes from 4 up to 8. So that is what we're looking at. Big chunks, but very, very low cost. The only reason we see someone would want to keep a disk-based system in a data center any longer in the future would be I have less than 500 terabytes of capacity put on. And this now has given us you're familiar with our Evergreen One program, right, Matt?
Sure. Yeah. But I think, there have been changes enough recently where it's worth visiting and chatting about.
Yeah. So that's I would call it a storage rental model. So our partners make an offering to customers on, here is an amount of capacity that you want to have. It's going to be metered and measured, but your customers are now looking at a, a price per gigabyte per month for storage as an outcome, as opposed to buying an asset, depreciating it, carrying it. So we've been doing this for a long time, and we have different tiers and service level agreements inside of that. But one of the things that we've added with the E family out now is what we're calling a UDR tier. So very, very dense, unstructured data tier. And this is coming in at about a penny and a half a gigabyte a month for a rental cost. When the FlashArray E is shipping, our entry level to that is going to be 500 terabytes of capacity. So, round numbers, let's say a half a petabyte, someone could get into one of these systems renting it. And from there, if you're renting, you can grow in pretty much any granularity you want to. It doesn't have to be in increments that match the physical representation. You're renting 500 gigabytes, you could rent 600, you could rent 750, you could grow into it, or
no waiting for procurement. If you do happen to bump up and grow, the storage is there, you just start using it.
The storage is there, you just start using it. You don't have to sign an agreement. You can burst into it very cloud-like and just pay the metering overages. Or if it's going to be a consistent type of usage above what was initially scoped, they can just re-execute an addendum to the contract to get the committed, that upfront paid discounted rate on that capacity without reterming the agreement. So the agreement will still expire at the same time as the original one. They're just going to pay in advance a discounted rate for capacity they know is going to be consumed.
I mean, at that rate, penny and a half per gig, I think, unless my math is wrong, is that about $15 a terabyte?
I think that's probably, are we doing it right? Or is it 150? I think it's 150.
Is it 150? Did I come in wrong there? Because if it's a penny, then 100 pennies is 100 gigabytes, or 15 pennies is 100 gigabytes, and then times 10 there is a terabyte, and that's $15.
Yeah, all right. Your math is right. I was I forgot that was 1 penny, not 15
cents.
Because
at that point you're in the range of what you're paying Azure for, or AWS for their cool blob, or S3. You're in that ballpark, which quite a bit different from a performance characteristic, right? So that's very impressive.
Yep. So let me try this.
What else we got? What else is new?
Slide deck is not moving at the rate I wanted it to. I apologize for that. All these things I hid unhid themselves. So this is what I wanted to get at, is talking about Evergreen One. We come with a host of service level agreements in there. So for people interested in moving into an operational rental model, there's things that you get out of that. So when people look at, well, what's less money, buying something or renting something, it's really tough to compare, because what brings value to an end customer, or what has value, is unpredictable and variable. So you get things in a rental model you don't get in a CapEx model. So do these have value? And part of it is you get service level agreements. And what a service level agreement means is we're stating a certain thing is going to happen, or a threshold won't be exceeded. And if it is, Pure now is paying the customer for their experience. So these are not service level objectives. These are agreements that have financial penalty to them to pay the customer. And so you get an uptime guarantee. So when you buy something, you don't get a guarantee on the uptime. So this is, if you're not seeing your 6 nines of availability, Pure's going to pay you. If you're not getting the performance of that tier, the IOPS per terabyte that we state that tier can get, there's going to be refunds and credits and things like that going out. We have a 0 downtime SLA in there, stating we will never ask a customer to take their storage offline for planned maintenance, that all maintenance is done live online. So if we ever ask a customer to, for a millisecond, make their storage unavailable, we're in violation of that SLA, and there is remedies and credits that go with that. But the new one in here is really what we want to talk about today. And this is unique to our Evergreen One, so our rental model. And this is a ransomware recovery SLA. And it's a little different than most of the ransomware recoveries, which are going to talk about what's the speed that we can, back up from and things along those lines. And what we really discovered from a while of working with customers and going through engagements of people who've experienced ransomware, one of the things they don't talk about is as soon as you notify an authority, being either your insurance company, the police, the FBI, your data center becomes a crime scene, and your access to things in that data center are no longer guaranteed. And in fact, there are some things you can guarantee you will no longer have access to. And one of those is the data storage. The data storage is usually taken away, isolated, put into a forensics environment, and it'll be under forensics analysis for months, is easy to say. That's a near certainty. So saying I give you this SLA that you can restore your data at this rate isn't relevant or meaningful if you don't have something to actually
Sure,
put
too.
that data onto. So that's this ransomware recovery SLA. This is stating that with Evergreen One, if you want to buy this extra SLA, so all the other ones are included, this one is an uplift. And I think you'll see why here in a second. This is stating that if you contact Pure and state you've had a ransomware event and this has impacted your Evergreen One environment, we will red label overnight you brand new gear and get that stood up in your data center the next day so that you now have an environment to restore to. And our personnel will stay on site until all of your data has been moved from that old array to that new array so you can actually be back in production. So we'll use whatever methods we'll plan out ahead of time with the customers. How do you want to restore? Do you want to just be pulling snapshots over? Do you want to replicate from the old one to the new one? Do you want to use backup recovery DR software? We plan this ahead of time, but you get the gear within 24 hours and a Pure person on site to go through that data move and get it on. And we think this is pretty unique that you're going to actually have clean storage gear and acknowledge this is what we do. There are other things involved. There's other stuff that might have been damaged or taken out, but what we can impact is the data, and we can make sure a customer has an SLA and a guarantee that they will get a fresh new thing to restore their data to. It'll be up and running on there, and that old gear, they can just forget about it. They have no obligation to that old gear. They're just going to run on the new stuff. They don't ever have to migrate back to the old when the forensics done. When the forensics is done, Pure will take that old gear and do whatever we're going to do with it, depending on what happened to it. But you just get new stuff, and that's a new starting point, and your future just goes from there.
Yeah, that's nice because I think a lot of system engineers and admins and people who are responsible for the infrastructure focus on how do I technically get back up, right? But ultimately, if it's something where the feds are involved, like you said, crime scene, that's it. It's no longer a usable piece of hardware. There's fingerprints on that gun and they're taking it. And at that point, I think a lot of people haven't thought about, well, shoot, what do I have to do? Or imagine trying to order hardware from scratch. That's might as well probably close the doors at that point. So it's a hugely unique concept. And I like that because I hadn't even thought of that. When you brought that up, I go, oh, that's true. Ransomware puts a different paradigm than just a technical encrypting of the files. It's actually the criminal aspect where it's out of your hands. It's great. It's really cool.
Yeah, and we're hoping this resonates with customers out there who truly want to, put in a plan for recovery from ransomware. And you should absolutely put the lion's share of your money into prevention. But you look at people who've been victims, there are organizations who have put lots of money and lots of resources into prevention. So it's only responsible to have a plan. I think one of the quotes I heard is just because you have a home security system doesn't mean you don't lock your door at night.
And I mean, like, well, let's say you've got ransomware insurance and it covers your storage array. Great. I've got to still reorder it, rebuy it, and wait for it to show up however many weeks or months that may take. So this
Mhm.
kind of cuts to the chase and maybe you can bring cyber insurance down a little bit with that as well.
I would think it'd be worth a discussion with your insurance agent on if I buy this guarantee and get myself new gear automatically, could that impact my premium rates or my declaration charge or anything in there? I don't think there'd be anything that would completely be a cost offset, but getting back into business a month, 2 months later has such reputational damage that, do you ever fully recover? So in my opinion, it's worth investing in, but I don't hold everybody's checkbooks.
Very neat.
And then one thing we did on top of this at the same time was released a feature in Pure One. And for those not familiar, this is our phone home mechanism. So it's a software as a service that all of our customers receive where they can see and visualize data that comes from their storage environment to a as a service environment that we provide access to. So this does a lot of stuff. But one of the things we've added now is anomaly detection. So it's going to be looking for changes in the data that indicate something different has happened. It doesn't mean nefarious. It just means something is different. So you can see this is visualizing a graph, and each one of those lines on there is going to be a different volume or file system, just some presentation of storage. And you can see it's following a trend until right here on the right, the line drops. This is a very obvious everything is changing at the same time. And in a ransomware event or other bad act, it may not happen to everything at the same time. So it may cascade over a period of hours when different storage volumes are impacted by something. So this can be used to help alert to something going on, but I don't think that's really meaningful because it's telling you something bad already happened. There's many ways. So yeah, maybe it does that. Maybe that's helpful, but it's probably not very helpful. But what this is also helpful is, there's all these big problems that come with ransomware and the restore, as we said, you got to have something to restore to. But the decision of what point in time do we restore to, and you're not going to restore to before someone got into your system. That dwell time could have been 6 months. You're just looking, I need to restore before this bad payload was actually executed. So when was it executed? When was it first seen? And from this gives you a very easy way to determine what is the point in time where an encryption payload was executed, and how do I move to the time before that, and could help you on a volume by volume basis if there was a cascading type of attack that happened. So you could actually restore each LUN or each file system at its level of granularity to the time before it was impacted for the attack, and minimize the amount of lost data that would happen. So we're giving people a way to say, I'll have gear. We have a variety of mechanisms to really protect that, to ensure that you have copies of data that cannot be damaged or deleted. So we call that safe mode. So that's a whole other discussion. But now it's, well, what point of my safe mode data should I be restoring to onto this new gear that comes in?
So we have a question, Steve. Is anomaly detection available now?
Anomaly detection is available now inside of Pure One. Yes.
Great answer.
And when you go into Pure One in the dashboard, there is assessments, and you'll see a data protection assessment. And you'll see every array you have. So if you have multiple, you'll see lots of these little hexes, and the hexes will be different colors depending on recommendations. And a red hex really indicates that you have no type of native data protection going on in that. You're not even taking local snapshots of that volume. And then yellow and thin greens, you can hover on and it pulls up a detail on each one of these and a recommendation as to what we feel you should do. So something that is a dark green has local snapshots, has replicated versions of those snapshots, and has safe mode, meaning those snapshots are immutable and undeletable enabled on that. And it's customer decision. Not everything has to be green. Maybe a light green is acceptable. Maybe a yellow is acceptable for, certain types of workloads, but this just gives you a quick way to look at it. And then there'd be this kind of lightning bolt on an array, and that is going to be indicative of there was an anomaly detected in that storage. And by clicking on that hex, it would bring up the detail that we showed on the next slide.
Is there a way to create alerts, a trigger, an email, should there be a lightning bolt worthy event?
Yeah, there are ways to create alerts out of here, but that system's kind of slow. So we're really looking to people to use more API based to pull this out of a monitoring and alerting system. Email, my opinion, is kind of an ineffective tool at alerting. So using an external system that's looking at this is going to be, the best method in my opinion.
Great answer. Thank you.
So overall, I mean, we had a good accelerate this year. Um,
I have a question, a topic
oh
I'd
yeah,
like to chat about. Because I feel like I've seen some announcements from Pure, and as a partner being closer to the metal, have eagerly awaited like the let's go all the way thing. And so there's two things I want to talk about, but one of them is the unified file system. I think a lot of people are accustomed to Pure, well, they're a block storage file system. And I know the CompuVerde acquisition feels like a decade ago now at this point. But one of the things that I do love about Pure is the caution which the conservative nature in which you operate, in terms of some people might want to be a little bit more cowgirl, where let's just go and turn this feature on, where Pure is, hey, we can only say we're 6.9, 7.9s because we put up these guardrails and taken a great caution to make sure a head swap goes non-disruptively and up those uptime guarantees. But I've seen that play out, I think, with the file system too. Flat file, file access rather than just native block. But now it feels like Pure's like, we finally have gotten it right. And I would you mind paying a little attention to that and explaining a little bit what we've got?
yeah, and we've announced very recently unified file, and anybody who's had a really good finger on the Pure Pulse would say, you announced this like almost 2 years ago.
Right.
What's this re-announcement? And what we originally announced 2 years ago was, hey, we built unified file into the system, but it wasn't generally available. You as an end customer couldn't just choose to turn it on. It was in, my opinion is it was in what we would call a directed availability. A customer could apply for a feature and we would review their request, but reserve the right to tell someone, no, what you want to do with this is outside the bounds. So we spent, a year and a half of letting customers turn this on one by one, reviewing their use cases, and really protecting customer sat, saying we don't want to turn on something that we're not 100% confident in. So we started letting people use this and then doing these kind of 10x jumps. Okay, we'll increase the number of supported files and users and directories by 10x, and then we'll do it again. And now we'll let people do multi-domain authentication. And so we really kind of walked up over time to address any issues that we saw. What we didn't want to do was release a feature, say everybody could turn this on, and then learn a bunch of stuff that we didn't know that customers discover when it goes out there. So this announcement is really, FlashRate file is generally available. Customers can run it now, and we're not putting guardrails on who can and cannot, because we've spent the time, we're very disciplined and conservative on this release. So we don't feel like there's risk to the end user. We're a customer sat, it doesn't even sound right, but net promoter score is really what it is. Company first. It's how we grade ourselves, is our customer satisfaction number. Everything we do, it's how does that impact that? So we're very comfortable now saying, turn on the file services. we treat this as a first class citizen. It's not file on top of block or block on top of file. It is block and file side by side on top of the layer that does the data deduplication. So when you store something in a file, if you have a copy in block storage, it will globally dedupe across an array, regardless of how that data may have been alternately saved. But also performance wise and access wise, we're giving the same level of performance to file as block inside of the system.
And I think that caution, the historic caution and care should inform the approach here too. If they're taking the guardrails off, think of how trustworthy it must be, right? I mean, that there isn't a change in the approach. It's just a statement about the stability and the robustness of what they're offering now. To that, to wit, I always like to use that phrase, to wit, Steve. Historically, software upgrades, support has always been intimately involved with that. Things have changed there from what I understand as well.
Yes, we've had self-service upgrades out for a little bit of time, maybe 6 months now.
Which is great, by the way. Like the whole involving of support, that's not a complaint, because that having the handheld, having them take care of it, and that's always been the easy button up to this point too. And now you're making it even easier from what I understand.
Yeah, so we're not getting rid of that. For people who really enjoy that, we always call it the white glove support, where you choose the date and time of your code upgrade. A person is going to remotely do it, and it's a human you can interact with who can give you feedback. If that's the level that someone wants, they can continue doing that. What we've really done is automate all of the steps that our support reps would go through. What are the checks that they run to ensure that the system is stable and ready during the upgrade? What are the possible things that can go wrong? How do you automate discovery of that? How do you remediate it? And when do you declare, like, this is not going right? This is a completely new anomaly. I'm going to stop before I do harm and actually pull a human in the loop. So that is really what we've developed, and it's done through Peer 1, so the same interface that customers are already using, that if they choose, they can just go in there and run their own code upgrades. And it's done in the same manner, if you will, that you would when you're interacting with a human. The health checks are now run automatically. If the thing has passed all the health checks, you can move on to the next step and actually deploy the code upgrade. Or you can choose a time when you want it to run. Like maybe you want it to run at 2 a.m. For policy of your business, or you could just do it right now during the business day. And that system is looking for all of these checkpoints, or it goes along. And if something happens that is out of the normal or not expected, it either has an automated remediation in it, or it's going to just stop and pull a human support rep into it to address them.
Love it. Love it. I like how it's not a, it's just an improvement of the process. Like you said, that white glove handling is still there. It's just we have an even more efficient option if you so choose. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't invent self-service upgrades. Other people have been doing it for a long time. But as you're pointing out, we're very conservative. It's about the experience. We don't feel the need to be first to market on anything. We want to be best to market on everything. So sometimes you'll see us, like, we have a definite advantage in working with all flash, and we're going to be first to market in many, many things when it comes to working with flash media because of that advantage. And other things we'll come along a little bit after, everybody else, but we're really concerned with stability, availability, the customer experience. And when I started at Pure, you do the new employee thing, and the founders come on stage and do a talk. And one of the things I heard that day that still resonates with me was his goal was to be the last great storage company, not the next, not just the last great storage company, period. So there wasn't a timetable on, we got to get there today. It's going to be, we're going to get there and sustain that forever.
Excellent. I think we hit all the major points, Steve. Did you have anything else you wanted to mention?
That was the major points. I mean, we have newer flash media that's increasing the densities. are the any way you measure this from a green perspective, if it's going to be IOPS per watt or it's going to be terabytes per watt, the BTUs, you can carve this up in any way. We're factors better than any disk-based solution, and we're, almost twice as good as competitive flash-based systems. We're about 80% more efficient than most of the competitive flash-based systems out there. So we're leaning green, we're going big, we're keeping our performance that we started with, but we're really expanding into cheap and deep storage with all flash, which is kind of a new paradigm. Might not make sense to everybody, but those traditional workloads that used to just be what's the least expensive thing we can get, you should give us a shot at those.
I think it's fantastic, and I've made no secret that by way of merit, Pure is my favorite company that I like to talk to my customers about. Ultimately, from my standpoint, and those who know me have probably heard this position before, but I like having my customers go to sleep not worrying. Happier customers that have the nightmare scenario is a year later, Matt, that solution you sold me, not so great. That is like, that's what I worry about. Thankfully, I don't have to really worry about uptime in terms of my own stuff, or I don't no longer manage an environment, so I don't have to worry about the pager going off at 4 a.m. But the customer who does wake up and say, my pager went off and it's this thing you sold me, Matt, that is my nightmare scenario. So when I think about a company, a product line that I don't have unhappy customers on, that's Pure. And that's an enormous amount of pride for me, because I can rest easy and say, I recommended this for you. And look what this company is doing. They continue to invest in, that nice light touch, the competent support. You call, you're not going through a punch list. Have you rebooted it 3 times? You've got actual experts, US-based support. It's things like that I'm just very proud and excited about. And I see Pure continue to push forward. And I really appreciate, and just from those out there in the customer standpoint, they don't see this, but if I have a question, I don't have to open a ticket. Because we're such strong partners, we've got a Slack channel that I'll advertise to my customers. Look, if you're somehow not getting what you're expecting, let me know. And I've got a couple cages I can rattle. And whenever we had to do that, which is extraordinarily rare, we get to talk to people like Steve, who puts us in touch with who needs, to be involved, and things happen. So if, from a value add standpoint, from a partner standpoint, there's a lot of reasons we like Pure. Those are just a few reasons, but understand that we're recommending it because it is a fantastic technology platform. We've got tons of happy customers on there. Steve, I appreciate you, today and always. That was outstanding. A ton of great information. We've got follow-up questions on that. Please do reach out to myself, your account manager. We've got a couple of raffles here, so sit tight and to get to in just a moment here. But yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody and thank Steve again. Really appreciate you and your knowledge and your value to the ecosystem. It's fantastic. It's really good to see all that stuff.
Thank you for the kind words, Matt, and appreciate kind of the open forum here to really just show off what we're really proud of that we've done.
Yep. The raffle, we've got 2 things to give away for those who hung on. Thank you very much for attending, everybody. This was outstanding. We are giving away 2 prizes today. We will reach out to you directly shortly after this to sort out how to get them to you. But we wanted to post the winner for the Solo Stove, and I hope I get y'all's names right. We talked about pronunciation of towns and all of this, so if I get the name wrong, I'm sorry. But Bill Zelenek has won the Solo Stove. Bill, James will be reaching out to you on that. And we've got a Sonos Roam speaker, pretty cool too. Justin Comerford. Justin, congrats on that. So Jim will be reaching out to you that as well. So are there any questions here? I'll give it another minute or so. No big deal. But if anybody's got any questions, they can feel free to pop in the Q&A. If not, I'm available via email afterwards, and we can follow up with any offline questions. But if nothing else pops in QA over here the next 30 seconds or so, we can give you all back maybe 10 minutes of your day. This was fantastic. And yeah, and Doug Hurd, guest. Doug is actually a colleague. He is an SE, a local SE for Pure, and I've worked with him for a number of years. He's a great guy. And it's people like Doug that also make my job incredibly fun and easy because, again, I'm not speaking to the faceless man behind the curtain if I need a resource. I've even had situations where a customer would have an account team at Pure that maybe got promoted, moved on, whatever, something changed. So I pulled on Doug. I'm like, Doug, I know this is not your account. Can you help me out? It's never a problem. I try not to abuse it, but that's the kind of team you're working with in the Pac Northwest. It just absolutely fantastic. It's a pleasure. All right. No questions. We can give you back 10 minutes to your Wednesday. Steve, once again, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for attending, everybody involved in organizing. Really appreciate it. I'm Matt again. Take care, everyone. Thanks again.